The So Cute Runner series continues this time for June. It is that time of year I look forward to every year up at Green Bluff. There is this special place that I've been taking my kids since they were little. In June, those first berries, there's just something about that. It's like the beginning of summer or something. That fresh fruit, picking fruit with our family was just tradition. So we love to celebrate June, reminiscing about that. I can already see in my own garden that has plenty of strawberries, the bees are super busy. So I think it's going to be a really special crop this year. I love strawberries. So that is the applique, the classic log cabin block that, hey, it preceded all of us. This block has been around forever. I'm going to give you some tips and techniques. I'm going to do a fair amount of sewing together to show you what's the ingredients, what's the key to getting a log cabin block to come out to be exactly the size it should be. Kits are the way to go. You will be getting those exact fabrics. You'll be getting prefuse and laser cut applique, even your backing and your bindings included, and a tested full color pattern. That's where we'll start today. As you would expect with anytime you're doing patchwork, we all know what that means. Add some sizing to your fabric, get everything perfectly ironed out, get that iron heating up to full hot. It's patchwork time, right? Later on when we get ready to do the applique, we bring the heat back to medium, but for now, while we're focusing on that patchwork, that heat is all the way, whatever that setting is on your iron linen, max heat. All right, here's the key about doing log cabin blocks that will get you consistent every time, and that is perfect cuts. This is such an important block that this is not one of those blocks that's upsized and trimmed down. It is not. Those blocks, those logs, those lengths that really start building around a center square need to be cut precisely to the measurements in the pattern. I've got some specialty ruler on set with me. It's a 1.5 inch by 12.5 inch. It's actually not a ruler. I use that often because usually I'm dealing with strips that are a little bit wider than that. But in this case, this is one of those mission specific rulers that's going to help me dial that in and make this block come together so easily. This is the most important ruler we'll be using today on this particular block. So as we look at our pattern and really start to unpack that, as you can see, it starts around the center square. These first two cuts, notice there's always two cuts of the same fabric that bracket that center square. And we're talking about an individual block. I know you're making two of those, so in essence there'd be two of these and two of these. But if we just focus on the one block, notice you're cutting two ginghams. You're going to be cutting two of these, two of these, two of these, two of these. And of course, those lengths keep increasing. But notice this in our pattern. Aside from the center square being 2 by 2, notice how all the other cuts are 1.5 inches wide. So the very first thing that we already know is that 1.5 inch by length of fabric cut of fabric that's in your kit is very important because all of the other subcuts will be based on that. So when you get your fabric in your kit, or maybe you're going to pick up the pattern and do this from home, and that's great too. We just offer options for kits because they're so convenient, right? You don't have to trace all of this out. Well, I know what that's like. I always think, oh, I can do all that. I end up putting it aside, right? Time is of the essence and time is short. But the most important thing with each of these fabrics is that initial 1.5 inch cut is of course right on the mark, but then those subcuts are very important. Well, we all know that the 1.5 inch ruler by Creative Grid actually comes in two sizes, the 6.5 and the 12.5. But what about those width of fabric cuts? This is where I'm going to grab for my 2.5 inch by 24.5 inch. And the reason I love this ruler, I use this for so many things. Cuts like this, cuts like binding strips that are 2.5 inch. And if I want to make a jelly roll of my own, I simply have my fabric, make my first clean cut, lay this on here and I'm cutting 2.5-inch strips. This is an incredible tool, but how I would use that specifically, I want to focus just a bit before we start about the patchwork about this tool. Notice the white dots down here say 1 and 2. I'm going to turn this around. Notice how the black dots say 1/2 and 1 1/2. Ding, 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 1 1/2. There's so much intelligence behind the Creative Grid ruler besides these grips that as I put pressure on, the ruler's not sliding away. It stays put. Once we have our fabric, we've added a bit of sizing and ironed everything out. Make that first clean cut because all fabric's going to have a little bit of a jagged edge. That just is. Once you've established that, now we go to our fabric and that 1 1/2-inch right here, this right there, I'm not using the mat anymore. I'm now looking at my fabric, and that's why I've kind of turned. I want to turn your attention away from the mat and onto this ruler that I'm laying that beautifully clean cut we all make when we get ready to do strips, right? We clean that edge off. This is what you're laying exactly on that edge where it says 1 1/2, and then I make that clean cut. This is how we start making precise cuts from a larger piece of fabric. Once we have made that long cut and it's time to subcut that, and specifically as we can see with the gingham, a 3-inch and a 2-inch, a 4-inch and a 3-inch, 5 and 4, and we go on like this. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I just grabbed some scrap fabric. So let's pretend that, in fact, I'll just do it with this one here. I'm running a little bit tight on space, but let's just pretend this was our fabric, okay? And I've cleaned off my edge, which, and I'll just do the whole thing with you. I'm just gonna clean off the edge, assuming maybe it's not as clean as I would like. Oh, I moved. Let me start that again. I could feel myself move. All right, here's what I'm gonna do now. This is coming over to this side. 1 1/2 all the way down. Do you see this? How perfectly cut that is. Now, that's not approximately 1 1/2. It is 1 1/2. All right, so now we've made that larger cut. I'm always going to trim away the selvage, of course, but let's just pretend that we're going to be cutting this one right here. Let's pretend this fabric is this fabric. I need to cut a 1 1/2 by 7 and a 1 1/2 by 6. Here's why I pulled out that 1 1/2-inch by 24 or 12 1/2-inch ruler. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square up that very end just to make sure everything is square. Notice how I'm using the mat again. I'm laying my cut along that line, just like that. I'm going to get this cleaned up, so I'm making a perpendicular cut. Now watch the magic. This is the brilliance of this particular ruler. I love this and why this works so perfectly for the 1 1/2-inch. Okay, we said the first cut was 7. Check this out. Do you see how I will now lay this right on this line, just like this? I'm looking at 7. And I'm going to make that cut. If I had a set of stickers right now, I would be labeling that K. I am a big fan of labeling. The next cut is a 6-inch cut. 6. We already know it was cut to 1 1/2. We make the cut. I'm going to label that J. This is the key. A log cabin's block success relies on mostly 2 things: precise cutting and a 1/4-inch seam allowance. That's it. So that I wanted to, sometimes I just breeze over, cut your fabrics. But it's more focused on that when it's a block that's not a trim up block. We do lots of those things where the block is slightly oversized. It's forgiving, right? Where you don't have to be so perfect, you get to square up. That is not the case in this particular style of making the log cabin block, and that's okay, right? We're not always going to have oversized and trim up. That's just part of the quilting journey. Some blocks are like that, some are not. All right, let's talk then, assuming that everything has been cut out perfectly. This block is going to work in a clockwise rotation, starting with our center square. We have our plaid, gingham, I should say, and we have our gingham, and then we have our fabrics. This is kind of what I would call the first round, always moving in a clockwise rotation. So you can see why it's now very important that we get a 1/4 inch seam allowance, because the fabric that's coming next depends on that being accurate. So I will put a pin here or hold it. It's pretty small, but you can bet I absolutely have my seam guide on my machine. That's right here. No scant 1/4. This is a full 1/4 inch seam allowance. I also have my diagonal seam tape on my machine right here. This just helps me kind of get my runway going nice and straight before I even get near that needle. All right, now got my seam guide in place, and we're going to sew with our 1/4 inch. And the cool thing is, we always press away from the center. It's so easy with a log cabin block to just always remember you're pressing away from the center every time. So we have this. We have our second portion that we'll place right side together. I'm going to sew from this side to trap that seam allowance downward. Pinning here, pinning to the end. Sewing a 1/4 of an inch. Okay, pressing to the outside. Just trim a little of these extra threads here. Okay, let's look to the side. Noticing how everything's just working, because everything was cut so precisely, and we're sewing with a very precise 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now let's look here. Yes, once again, here's why I don't want to sew from this side. I don't want to breeze over this. Notice how this seam is going upward. While it feels good to sew on the side that doesn't have any seams, remember that the feed dog's action on the bottom of your machine, that's beneath you, can't see it, is always moving the fabric along. Sometimes what happens is that seam ends up rolling back and you get what's called a rolled seam. Looks like that. Can't have that. You cannot expect a block to lay flat if you have a rolled seam. The beautiful part about me flipping it over is notice that seam's now going down. That's the direction I'm moving in. There's no chance to have a rolled seam if I'm sewing from this side. And this is something I didn't understand for a long, long time. I was always dealing with those rolled seams, and going back and seam ripping and resewing and just, I don't know why it took me so long for this to click, but it took a while. All right, let's sew another good quality 1/4 inch. Okay. Okay. And you already know what's coming next, right? Here. And let's flip that over and let's see what we're going to look at. I definitely would do this from the back of this so I can keep an eye on those seams. So there's no shenanigans happening here. Make it fit. Make it fit. Have to make that fit. Notice I pinned the beginning and the end. Pinning right here. Okay, so our first round of our log cabin block is complete. Now notice when I put it down to the table, it's square right now. If I wanted to add the next log, do you realize that it would fit on any side? How important do you think it is to put that down in the orientation of your pattern? 100% important. I've already done all the things, as you know, right? Let's say that you just put it down like this and add the block. It would fit perfectly because this thing's a square right now. Just be mindful that when you get ready to put the next round on, you've reoriented your block on your table. And of course, here we go again. Pin, pin, pin in the middle. So you keep going until you have your second round and you have your third round. So that's the key to log cabins. Again, get your fabric pressed out nice and flat. And a good clean cut is so important. And the accuracy of those cuts is key. Starting off with a good solid 1.5 inch by width of fabric cut. And once you start bringing those down and you're able to work with a mission specific ruler like the 1.5 by 12.5, take that opportunity. It's going to just guide you into success. And of course, the 1/4 inch seam allowance. You already know me. I use these at home. I was using these all weekend while I was sewing a project. It really helped land those blocks the correct size. So you're going to be making 2 of the log cabin blocks. Again, an absolute classic, right? Been around for absolutely forever. Appliqué is a lot of fun on this. We couldn't resist having a lot of different colors of strawberries on this one. Our team was very busy. I'll just remind you that just the convenience is just undeniable. And I like to go ahead and pre-assemble my strawberry units, kind of individual groups. I've already done a few ahead of time. But here's how we work with our diagram, which will be included. Here is, remember the sequence, light pad, applique diagram, and I'm going to move that off of my wool pressing mat because remember there's got to be a transfer. We cannot iron on the Applifuse or on the light source. Can't do that. All right. So we lay that over the top. Now here come our shapes. You know what? I'm going to remind people. I saw people at retreat struggling removing the paper from applique shapes. So as a reminder here, the easiest way to remove paper is kind of think of the fabric as being kind of mean to it. Take paper side up, just pinch really hard, and you see how that released? just like that. Don't dig at that. Don't be tempted to use the tweezers. You'll end up potentially fraying the fabric, maybe even putting a hole in it. Okay, so they're all really the same size. The strawberries are the same exact size. We'll just do a couple together. Once you've assembled the little units, and notice how I'm pushing down. Why am I pushing down? The Appliqué mat has a grip to it. I kind of grew up with an applique sheet that was so slippery. There was no grip to that. Things were just, whoa, if you sneezed, if you breathed heavy, things were moving. Look at this. Nothing's moving. The Appliqué mat is phenomenal. I'm going to go ahead and bring that heat back to a medium. I just let go of that so I don't get any of this temptation to quote iron, right? Did too many years of that ironing my pilot shirts. I let go, 6, 7, 8 seconds. All of that is now merging into one shape. I'm gonna let that cool down, very important step. In the meantime, what I can do in your kit, cut your backgrounds to be the exact size that is mentioned in the pattern. And what that's going to do for you is that's going to sit exactly in the footprint of your applique diagram. You've removed, oh, I'm going to remove that. Again, I'll show you again. Paper side up, give a pinch. See how it just releases immediately. Don't be timid. It will let go if you're just a little bit, a little pushy with the fabric, I would say. This is going to go right along the edge. We almost don't really need a light source for that, do we? We can put that, let's just put that off to the side for the moment. The Appliqué mat comes into play when you have layered applique. People ask me that question. They're like, well, why didn't you use the Appliqué mat? I was doing something similar like this at retreat. I'm like, because there's no layer. There's not one layer being stacked on top of another. When you have that juxtaposition of one over the top of the top, that's when the Appliqué mat. But in something like this, it's just the scallops onto the background. There's no need to use the Appliqué mat. So hopefully that makes sense. And of course, same thing. Holding that in position, 6, 7 seconds. Scooting that down. If you need any really fine movement, this is like an extra pair of hands. Okay. Okay, let me bring that to medium here. All right, let's bring this back. My favorite thing is removing those applique shapes, very satisfying because of the incredible engineering behind these. And there's never any residue at all left on the Appliqué mat, none. I've used the same Appliqué mat 8 years, 9 years. It's just incredible. Now, to keep that tackiness and so it doesn't get dusty when we clean and vacuum, we make sure we roll this back up. The Gypsy Quilter made the slap and wrap peels. These are these right here. Anything you want to be able to wrap up. I see people who do machine embroidery and have rolls of stabilizer that just come undone. This is a great way to keep things from being, dusty, dirty, and it keeps it more compact and keeps your space more organized, which definitely leads to more peaceful creations, right? Okay, so now this is just you deciding on where do you want to have all of your strawberries. You're just going to be in a different place than ours. And this is just the fun part of not having to deal with the tracing and the cutting. I think I like to have a pink one up there and maybe Maybe I like this here. I like that one. I'm going to do pink in the opposite corners. Okay. I often use my pattern to kind of transport my applique. It gives it a little bit of rigidity. And then I slide it away, and here we go again. All right, 6, 7 seconds. Iron everything down. Now what we like to do, and you've probably heard me say this if you've been watching this series, is at this point, while we do have a beautiful thread set, I don't use it yet. We already know that we need to add quilting, top quilting. So what we like to do once we have our log cabin blocks made, we have this put together, we sew all of this together in a row, we add our side borders, we add our end borders, then we add our Callydale fusible fleece that irons to the back side of our piece top. On the very back of that, we smear a bunch of 505, or you can use a 505 spray, or however you want to do that, to introduce the backing. So we have our quilt sandwich. That's when we use our thread set. It does not just the machine applique, but it creates this embossed look, and it gets everything quilted together. And you can see that we were just really showcasing all that beautiful thread. Trim off the excess fleece or batting and backing, and then you're off to binding. So this one is really fun. It is just that kind of touch back to where quilting began long before we were here. These are turn of the century quilt blocks that were being made even in the 1800s from feed sacks and anything women could get their hands on. And I love connecting current fabrics back to our heritage. And with today's tools, we can be even more accurate. I think the ladies that were making these blocks had to work a lot harder than we do today with these amazing tools that really help bring us and guide us right into precise quilt blocks and just add to the joy. So head to the Shabby website. There's always limited kits available. Be sure to pick up your quilt kit. Be sure to pick up that thread set. And as you can see, the 1.5 inch by 12.5 inch is a great ruler to add to your sewing room. If you need to get that light source, be sure to pick that up. And of course, any other notions. If you have not already subscribed to YouTube, or maybe you've got friends in your sewing circle, maybe your quilt guild, let them know about Shabby, right? I love it when friends tell me about good news. They recommend a brand of makeup or whatever it might be. I'm like, you know what? They wouldn't be telling me about this if they didn't really believe in that. So be that authentic advertisement for Shabby, because your voice speaks louder than our own. Did you know that? So thank you for giving us me a little bit of your day to show you how to make precise log cabin blocks and the fun and convenience of doing prefused and laser cut applique.